Hiya, and welcome to this second of the new series of Our Home podcasts. Our first podcast, Lindsay introduced, telling a little bit about ourselves. But this is a series in which we're talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly of our church experiences that we've actually had over the last 40 years. We've been in a variety of churches at that time. We've had some really good experiences. We've had some bad experiences. We've had some ugly experiences. And I think this has actually taught us a lot about, who we are, what is church, what is the church that we would like to see, as a result. What are the things that we've left behind? What are the things that we're taking with us? So yes, it has been a very, very period of learning, what we like and what we actually don't like. The first podcast was my version of events, as it were, in the churches that we have been part of, and this one is Lindsay's version of events. So we're going to be talking about the different churches all the way back. We have a church that met in West London. It was about 300 members, quite a charismatic church. We'll be looking at one that met, in Wiltshire, a smaller church of about 100. And there was another one in Abingdon, in Oxfordshire. This was probably the smallest church that we were part of. And then finishing off with the largest church that we were most recently part of as well. Been asking the questions, 3 questions that we're actually asking of each other. What have we learned from these experiences? What needs to change? And what are we leaving behind? And what are we taking forward as we reimagine church? So I'll leave it over to Linz, right, to basically tell us from the first church that we were part of, in West London, about 300. As I mentioned, there was quite a charismatic church. But what would you say was the good that you actually learned from this church? What were the good experiences?
Yeah, I mean, as you're saying that, I think it's probably more helpful if I fill in the bit that's different, and I might skip over quite a lot because we've already said it. If
From
it's
the previous, podcast, yes.
So just encourage you to listen to the one from 2 weeks ago. Because a lot of it will be the same, I think, particularly with the first 2 or 3 churches. So, yeah, I mean, that's where I first became a Christian. So very much like you, it was a positive experience initially. And I mean, for a lot of the time that we were there, I think looking back, for me, it's more looking back now, knowing the different streams of Christianity that I've grown to appreciate. I can see now that it feels more extreme in some ways and imbalanced or whatever than it did at the time.
Yes, because I think for both you and I, that was really our very first experience of church.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I came over from the US, right? And that was the church that I joined. You were part of it already, but you were 17?
Yeah.
I was 24. 23, 24 something.
23.
So that was really our very first experience of church.
I think what I'd like to pull out from that one, just because of time, because I think our experience was probably, well, it was very similar, and I'd sum it up in a very similar way to you, is that subsequently we've become aware of something that happened there that was extremely painful for somebody. Who will obviously protect completely. But I think this experience is not uncommon. So, sadly. So a good friend of ours at the time, a very good friend of ours at the time, we found out later, a lot later, actually, quite recently, that they had issues. They were exploring issues in terms of sexuality and wanting to talk to somebody about that because of their own background and feeling quite conflicted and trying to understand stuff.
And very vulnerable to be able to go ahead and actually approach anybody to talk about that, so you should feel safe.
Yeah.
with the church leaders.
Yeah, so they went and spoke to one of the church leaders, and instead of getting a, gosh, that must be really tough.
A gracious approach.
What is it that's led you to feel this? How might we be able to explore this together? How can we support you? Basically, one leader went and told another leader about what this person had confided in them, who it spilled out into the whole church, and this person was shunned, rejected, condemned, made to feel awful, like the worst thing ever. And then other members of the congregation also treated that person the same way. And it's just so immensely painful to realize and to hear that had happened.
Yeah, because this is something that we were totally unaware of that was actually going on. You know, this person was a dear friend of ours who sort of then subsequently sort of disappeared from the scene.
Yeah, because it was so
because it was
painful,
so
the way they were
painful, and
treated.
he had become so vulnerable, right, in it. And we only learned about all of this quite recently, but we were totally unaware that this was actually going on behind the scenes, and it was church leadership. And one of the things that I want to say, you know, before we go on, you know, part of the introduction to the other podcast, Lindsay introduced the concept of friendly fire. The churches and church leaders and church members have an incredible capacity, not incredible capacity, but they can really shoot their own if they're not careful, if they act, you know, in a way that they shouldn't, if they say things that they shouldn't, if they do not demonstrate the love of Christ, you know, the grace of God, you know, the approachability and the vulnerability and the pastoral approach. The church can be very good at shooting its own and sometimes causing them to just say, the heck with this. You know, this kingdom of God business is not for me. Thank you very much, and off they go. So anyway, this was a situation that you were describing where we would basically say this was very severe friendly fire when it shouldn't have been.
Absolutely, and I think that too many leaders just don't appreciate the authority, the spiritual authority that they hold, and how they can cause deep wounds if they don't hold that with real. It's no small thing to be in a position of authority over somebody as a manager is one thing, but the capacity to wound when you're in spiritual authority, if you are careless with your words or your actions, is just phenomenal.
Or your wrong beliefs as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that in terms of the bad and the ugly, you know, we had a bad experience there. That was an incredibly ugly and wounding experience that our dear friend had at the hands of leadership, and the impact and the consequences on that person's life was absolutely massive and lasted decades, I'd say. And I think just they're still
there. They're still there. Yeah, they're still there to this day. The wounding is still there.
Yeah. And I think for some people, when they're wounded so severely by making themselves vulnerable and then not being listened to and not being loved and cared for well, some people manage to hold on to their faith in that situation, don't they? They somehow manage to not throw the baby out with the bathwater and may hold on to Jesus and still have relationship with him and not project that. But others, because the body is supposed to be a representative of God and God's love and all the rest of it, when you are treated that way and that poorly, I think it takes a tremendous strength of character, grace of God, resilience, whatever you want to call it, to not project that onto God himself. And just, I think it's really difficult to hold on to your faith sometimes, depending on, you know, the severity of what's happened. So that's why this topic is so incredibly important, because it's not just about, oh yeah, we can all share experiences of wounding at the hands of church leaders. Just, you mustn't get bitter. You need to forgive them. Get over it. Yeah, of course you need to forgive them, and bitterness only hurts yourself, no one else. That all of that is true. But if responsibility isn't taken for it, it's, you know, it literally affects people's relationship with God, God himself, often as well. And that's why this is so important to shine a light on these things and bring these things out into the open and make sure that that we learn the lessons of history and learn to be better, because it's just not on to treat people like that.
So it sounds to me like what you're saying, these are the kind of things that you totally leave behind, those examples of how not to be a godly spiritual leader, right? That is not the way to do it.
Yeah, I think particularly with sensitive topics, when there are a variety of opinions, you haven't walked in someone else's shoes, and to jump down someone's throat and judge them or shun them or reject them because of a theological position that you hold, Scripture says, without love, I'm nothing. We are nothing. And there's no way that Jesus would have done that. Jesus would have loved and listened and cared and supported, irrespective of where that, or processed it with that person, and irrespective of where they landed. Love would never have been withdrawn. They would never have been rejected and shunned and all that stuff. So, yeah, that's definitely what we've got to leave behind. And it's still happening. It's still happening. There's so much polarization out there right now, isn't there, about all sorts of theological positions, spiritual beliefs, where people are entrenched in what they believe. And that truth, and they may be totally wrong in that truth for a start, that truth is far more important than love for another person, respect for another person, the humility to potentially be wrong, the ability to empathize and put themselves in another's shoes and see, in this case, what's going on here. So yeah, it's a really big one. It's a really big one. That
it is huge. It is huge, because it's the balance between you don't want to reject anybody and you don't want to go ahead and plant your flag to such a strong position that people do not feel that they can actually be safe in your presence. And I think this is one of the things that I think we've taken from these churches, that even if we disagree on what the truth might actually be, right, you are still safe in my presence.
Yeah.
Because I will not treat you in a way that will want to make you run a mile from me. Because what you still see in me is Jesus. What you still see in me is the love of the Father. If all you can see is a truth that judges you, right, and there is no love there, that's not a place I want to be.
No.
And I can understand why people do that. And that's the balance, and I think that a lot of church leadership today needs to be able to go ahead and handle correctly. How am I safe, even if theologically or culturally we disagree with where you happen to be? I still welcome you. That's a place that
I want to do everything I can to make sure that you do feel safe.
Yes. And even if we never get to the point of agreement, I will still never reject you. Yeah. That to me is one of the big things about what it really means to be Christ's disciple on earth today and part of the church. Imagine a church like that. Wow. Right.
I think I can skip on that one too, because
Trowbridge. Yeah.
that town in Wiltshire.
Yeah, town in Wiltshire. Yes.
It was also very similar to you, I think.
Yeah.
It was a positive experience, that one incident that was hurtful, but good people.
Yeah. Listen to my podcast, because again, what Lindsay's basically saying, as she's saying, is that she agrees with a lot of what I actually stated, and what are the things that we would take with us, what are the things that we will actually leave behind, So yeah, let's listen to that podcast as well, because there isn't much difference there. What about the next one, the one in Oxfordshire?
Yeah.
In Abingdon. Yeah. Tell me about that one.
Well, again, lots of good. We didn't know that we were doing what is now, or has been termed in the last decade, a missional community. It wasn't even called that then, was it?
Yeah.
So we just started with a handful of 6 people, just had them round, talked about life, found out where they were at, fed them lots of pizza, had fun, and it was very relational and very real, and
It's a great time.
Yeah, it was one of the highlights of our entire Christian life, those few years there. I think the other thing that I just wanted to pick out or pull out from that time was that was also the first time that I had been exposed to a very different type of Christianity in terms of creation and evolution and all that sort of stuff. Because it was full of these scientists who were in the Abingdon Science Parks. And one guy in particular, I remember the minister saying to us, "Oh, you know that guy over there? He's a top quantum physicist and he is actually paid to think." And I'm like, that was his words, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
paid to think. Okay.
A monster mind.
Yeah, mind the size of a planet. And we started learning. These Christians were full of faith. This particular guy would regularly preach. He was great. Really, really nice man. And we found out that they all believed in evolution. And they were
As Christians.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Of course. And they were like, 7-day creation. What are you talking about? That's rubbish. That does not hold up to science. It's an explanation of how, things were. Genesis is about how things were done, and not the detailed specifics of it, but the relationship between God and humankind and the spiritual principles, not like a literal thing. It's not a science book, and it shouldn't be taken that way. And that was the first time that, or maybe not the first time, because I guess I would have heard it, but I would have heard it and then heard it slagged off by the Christian circles that we were in,
evolution was anathema.
view.
Yeah, it was an evil theory.
Yeah, and even my dad, who also had a pretty big brain, was like, evolution, I'm struggling with it because of the, evolution between a species. There's not enough evidence. And so I'd half entertained it, but thought, and also there was something special, and still is, about the creation of humankind. But that's another story. This isn't about evolution. The point is, it was really good for my mind to be expanded by these Christians who were top scientists. And so we decided, right, let's stage a debate then. Do you remember?
We did, yeah.
So we got this guy who's paid to think.
Yep.
This top quantum physicist. I can't speak very well today. With, who was it? Someone else who was a creationist.
Yes,
I can't remember where we got him from. But anyway, we staged a debate between them, brought all the youth.
All the young people,
guys, let's hear what these guys have got to say. And it was really interesting. And I remember at the conclusion of it, I remember saying to the pay to think guy, but what about but what about this? What about the not enough evidence for fossils and all that, from species to species?
In between,
and how does it really work for a land, a sea amoeba or whatever it might be? I'm not explaining this very well. To morph into the land over a period of time when they're trying to breathe, and I just don't get it. And he was just, I can't remember his exact response, but he graciously said, "Look, Linz, I'm not saying that there is that it's a perfect theory and that it's got every single answer, but I'm telling you as a scientist that it's really the best we've got, kind of the working model. And that's not to say that God didn't intervene in a special way with creation and all that. I'm not trying to comment on that. But yeah, that was a real positive thing for me, and it just stretched my thinking and made me realize actually there is a whole nother world out there. And the same with the young earth, old earth thing, having Christians, really intelligent Christians, saying to me, and that was really good. It stretched
I mean, it brings a point, because I think our very first church that we attended was, I think, very black and white. It had the answers to everything. I remember feeling that way, that we had the answers to everything, and that the world didn't. And I think it bred arrogance in a sense.
Yeah.
And I think the church experience that we've had, as we've actually gone from one church to another, we've experienced, I think, different approaches. I think this particular church that we're talking about, and the exposure to top level scientists and Christians as well and everything, introduces, I think, a greater level of mystery. I think because we don't have all the answers, and I think that's one of the things that, as we have gone from one church to another, we develop, I think, the appreciation that, we don't have everything. We don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
Even part of some of our belief systems, we need to hold them lightly, because we might learn something else along the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we don't plant a flag, on the essentials, yes, right? On the non-essentials, you start holding them quite lightly. Is evolution one of the essentials? No, it's not. Yeah. So let's not make it so. Let's not make it black and white. Let's not make it a divisive subject, between people. Let's just agree to disagree, right? Genesis, the response to me for Genesis and the creation would be wow, not how. Yeah, it's wow. Yeah. So I think it's one of the things that I think I've taken and left behind is a black and white Christianity that has an answer to everything versus a Christianity that has a lot of room to learn and a lot of room to accept
and a lot
difference of opinion.
more respect for science and God's wisdom
Yes.
in God's world.
Yes.
He is behind all the science in the world. To have this divide and say that people who are scientists to kind of disrespect them and say, well, they're not full of faith and they're dissing this, that, and the other. That's just complete nonsense.
That's arrogance and judgment.
Yeah, it is.
I think it's the one thing that I think we've gladly left behind.
Yeah.
Gladly have left behind.
Yeah, so I'm really thankful and grateful to
Yeah.
that church for expanding my mind and enabling us to really consider other viewpoints and to debate graciously and come to different conclusions. So, yeah, that was really good.
Any other comments from those first three? West London, Wiltshire,
No, I
and
don't think
Oxfordshire.
so.
No,
I
I
don't
think,
think so.
yeah, I think those are the first three experiences. I mean, this was the church that was the smallest for us. If you'll get that from the previous podcast, it only had about 50 members or so. But I think we remember this one quite fondly.
Yeah.
As well.
You were very well known, and I think you've also said that out of all your church experience, you'd much rather it be small because you can be known and you can have those relationships.
Yes.
Once it starts getting 80 plus people, it's impossible to really know people.
And it's the church that we had the most freedom in, experience the most freedom in. With that.
That's fair.
Yeah. So we come to the last church that we wanted to go ahead and actually talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, our experiences, what we've learned, what we would take with us, what we would leave behind. We ran out of time, I think, in the previous podcast, so I'll probably be dubbing in, as well.
Definitely.
Yeah, so this is the conversation, I think, for both of us.
Yeah.
To be able to go ahead and talk. And this was a church in the north of England. When we joined it, it was one of the largest, in all of the UK.
Historically had probably been one of the two largest in the country.
Yes, the membership stood.
Let's just say over 1,000. We don't want
Yes.
evangelical exaggeration.
Yeah, we don't want to evangelisticate, the numbers here. But yeah, it was over 1,000.
Regular
Here.
attenders.
Yeah. So I mean, because this is your podcast, and I'll just dob in, right? Tell me about the good of this one.
Yeah, so I think the interesting story about this one is we were already doing what this church was famous for, which was missional communities, mid-sized communities, trying to return to more of the New Testament model where you'd have maybe 30 people meeting in a home because the homes wouldn't necessarily take more than that. They'd do life together. And that's where kind of, for want of a better word, growing in Christ, discipleship and all that, supporting one another would primarily take place. And the Sunday service was supposed to be, in the view of this particular church, still important, but seen more as a resourcing base, a time to come together and experience the dynamics of large-scale worship, the kind of dynamic of where there's an event, sometimes there can be a different dynamic, whereas the daily life and the processing of maybe what you might hear on a Sunday would happen, in the midweek. So that's what this church was famous for. But we didn't fully appreciate that we were already doing that down in Abingdon. But we just learnt it, I guess, on the job. God,
We were doing it by instinct.
We did it by instinct.
We did it by instinct. Yeah, what we felt was right. Yeah.
And the difference was we didn't even have a strong supporting, resourcing base. I mean, they were lovely, but all that managed to happen just outside of Sundays, really.
Yeah.
And we did meet together with, like you said, with other groups in the town as well. So there was a kind of a broader coming together celebration type stuff. So I think what the thing that was the most good for me out of that experience was, well, probably a couple of things, but was that this time we started a community of students. To be honest, it was probably easier to grow than the one in Abingdon was, because the one in Abingdon was grown through a small handful of teenagers that then invited all their friends, which was great. It was organic. We loved it.
Yeah.
It was the same with students, but because it was already a big church, it was quite easy to attract students. There was a big student drive. Of
What
all
an
the
attractional
churches
church.
in the city
Yeah.
Who would, they wouldn't like you said that, love. They weren't, no, they rejected being an attractional consumerist church. It was the life was supposed to be in the small, mid-sized communities. But I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It drew. Sorry, I'm not trying to contradict you there, because you might have seen it that way, but it certainly drew.
What I meant what I meant by
easily.
that is that I think at first, the church was the reason that we actually came to that town.
Yeah.
Yeah. It wasn't because we had a new job or anything like that. I think we were quite starstruck by the fact that we were coming to one of the elite churches, within the UK. And what I mean by attractional, I mean that every church has, in a sense, its own identity. And some churches actually market theirs much, much better than others. They develop a brand that is actually much more well known, and that attracts people.
That's what you mean.
That's what I mean. It was much easier, to start bringing in students, for example, that we were part of, right? Because the name existed, the
uni students,
the brand existed. The services were already geared towards technically attracting, students that were actually coming in, to this university town. Whereas what we had back, in the smaller church had none of that. There was no identity. There was nothing. We started from the ground and basically did the same work that was already happening here. From scratch. That's what I mean by attractional.
Yeah, so I enjoyed that, and I think the dimension that this church gave, which was different to the previous church in terms of us personally, well, me, I should say, me personally, was there was a strong emphasis on small group discipleship, and kind of the belief that actually the smaller the number of people, the higher degree of discipleship you get, because you can be real, you can go deeper. A Sunday service isn't primarily about bearing your soul and kind of growing in your faith, is it, in that sense? Whereas if you're in a group of 2 or 3, or I don't know if I want to use the word that was used for it, because I don't want to give it away.
Yeah.
But yeah, when you would regularly get together with groups of, say, 8 people, and you would ask each other like honest questions about your week, and about the things that were good, the bad, the challenges, the things you were thankful for, the things you were struggling with, and you would ask the Holy Spirit to actually highlight certain questions. And I think as far as it went, that was often a good thing, because it did keep it real, and it did enable you to just to be honest about how you were doing. I think the challenge with and be prayed for and supported in that. I think the challenge with something like that, though, is that's got to be a trusted environment. And I think, in some churches, when you make yourself vulnerable, there can be a feeling that, is this going to be used against me down the line? Because knowledge is power. And again, I didn't feel that it was an unsafe space, because the people I was personally meeting with, I did trust. It was usually, a staff team or whatever, or people in our own community that we were doing life with and building trust with. But I think a safeguard there for me, which would be, you haven't asked me this question, but I'm just going to say it.
Go on then.
In terms of a takeaway and what I would leave behind, I think that groups like that have a very strong leader, who will share some, but they're not going to bare their soul to you.
No.
It's more about them leading you, them discipling you, them facilitating questions and whatever. I personally think that a much better safeguard is when those things are peer-led, as I would call it. So you rotate the person that's guiding that group each time you meet, so that it genuinely feels that the balance of power is collaborative, because in Scripture it's the priesthood of all believers. You all have equal access to God. You can all hear God in the same way. You can all encourage and support each other in the same way. And I think once you start putting leaders on a pedestal, and that would also be kind of a bad thing, because there were leaders on a pedestal when we first got there. It changed, the culture did change, thankfully, and we did not buy into it. We were a bit shocked initially, weren't we? When we first got there, people were saying things like, I follow, and I follow, well, I follow, None of those had Jesus at the end. They were all names of people, mostly men, but also a woman. And we were like, what the freak? What do you mean you follow that person? And the whole premise was, well, that's okay, because like Paul says, in one verse in the entire Bible, imitate me as I imitate Christ. And that was kind of like seemed to be a justification for following that person. But in our view, those people were given way too much power and authority in a person's life to speak into their life, and seen as their leader in quite a heavy way. And we'd come from much more of a place of, you follow Jesus and not a person. And we hadn't even had a person to follow up to that point. We'd been longing for investment and mentoring and whatever, and hadn't had it. And I think I fell into it a little bit, to be honest, a little bit starstruck by these insightful people that I was working closely with, who'd be able to, bring an insightful word in these groups or in my one-on-one times with them. And that is okay, because there are some very insightful people out there, and some of the things that I was told were really helpful and life-changing nuggets of truth for me. One particular guy that I worked with, I'm really thankful for him and the way he inputted and invested into my life. But there's another side of it. There's another side of that. It can so easily go too far, where leaders have too much power, can practically become celebrities. And as we know from recent history, that is where so much problem can come in.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to hear your perspective, on it, because I think, as I've mentioned in a previous podcast, I think Linz and I are actually very different. The things that we notice, the things that we find valuable, the things that we respond to, not respond to.
Similarities, though.
Oh yeah, of course. Yes.
Yeah.
I would have to say though that this is the first super institutionalized church that I came to. From all the ones that we had, they were all, again, individual smaller churches. This one, I think, for me, we came with an incredible excitement, to be joining such a dynamic, church. And that's how we came in, so it's almost like your defenses are sort of low kind of thing, because everything is great. Everything is going to be great. We are finally going to be part of a dynamic, moving church. And one of the things that I mentioned from every single church so far is their welcome was extremely warm. I didn't experience that here. Because it's a larger church, right? I did not experience it's really great to have you here. It's not necessary. There's already a lot of people there.
Yeah.
But the odd thing was that the role that I had was already as a personal assistant to the main guy. So it's almost like I went into the inner sanctum right from the very beginning. And I thought that was going to be amazing. For me, I value relationship. I value friendship. I was looking for, perhaps expecting, that there would be great mentoring, because I felt great. We're joining a church that sort of has it together.
Yeah.
We a lot to learn from. But that wasn't reciprocated, in there, because I felt, for me, a personal assistant basically gets to know the person that they're assisting inside and out, how they think, what they do, so that you can actually assist them in the best way possible. Be it a romanticized version of what you see in films and things like that, I don't know. But in a sense, I walked in with my desire to be able to do that. And I sort of had the expectation that the same was going to be in return. It wasn't. It wasn't. I wasn't in the orbit of this person to be in that capacity. I was there to manage the admin side, and that was it. Nothing more than that. You know, why they called it a personal assistant, I really, really don't know. But again, this to me was so disappointing, you know, because one of the things that's really important for me, and I think is actually crucial to whatever it is that we call a church, right? Church is people, and relationships are so important. And the relationship just wasn't actually established that I felt needed, I think, to be established at that time. He basically said to me, if it is my task to be your friend, I will do so. But I don't see that as my task. My task is to be friends with his leadership team. You know, his personality is very different from mine. And it took me quite some time to just basically put my jaw up. And thinking, okay.
I think you were literally opposites. If you're talking about Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, we're probably literally opposites or something like that, you know. And there was quite a few experiences, you know. Nobody actually ever sat down with us to find out, who are you guys? What's your experience? You know, what do you have, you know, in your toolbox, you know, that could actually benefit, you know, the church, the leadership team here and everything. We were older than everybody else there, just about, you know. There were a few other ones, but we brought with us, I believe, the wealth of experience, you know, with YWAM, missionary work, SBS. And I'm not saying this in an arrogantly proud way. What I felt was coming is like, not interested in what you've got to offer. This is what we have to offer you. You know, the church had an incredibly strong DNA, and that was, in a sense, in that was almost the idol of the church, and as far as I was actually concerned. You know, we've got it, we're going to pass it to you. We want everybody within this church to live within this DNA, espouse this DNA, speak this DNA, you know, the whole thing. And within a very, very short time, I just felt this is, I was not engaging with it. I just really wasn't engaging with it because I didn't feel that that was my home, so to speak. The place that I found was my home within the church was a group that we were leading with the students, you know, and the young adults and the international community there. I think we continued the work there that we had actually had in the previous church. And we were able to just go ahead and do it naturally. And from that, raise other leaders that we were actually mentoring. The rest of the church for me was a struggle. I didn't find life in it, you know. If that was the bad side of it, you know, I really seriously didn't find that was actually giving me any life, because the message that I got is, you know, to be one of us, you have to wear the T-shirt and drink the Kool-Aid, basically, you know, to put it mildly, you know, in a bad way. That's what I actually felt. And unless you do those kind of things, you're not really part of us, you know. And I say that, it sounds really, really harsh, I think, but one of my values, like I said, is relationship. And I didn't feel that the relationship would be there if I didn't actually take on all the other burden, you know, of what the church was actually like. The brand was far too big for me.
Yeah, and also maybe flipping that. I don't know if this is a fair comment or not, but I think if you'd experienced the love and the relationship that you were hoping for and expecting at the centre, I think you probably would have had a different lens from which you would have viewed some of the DNA and some of what was going on. It's because the loving people well, and I know you mentioned in a previous podcast, so we won't go over it again, but the way letting a staff member go was the way that was treated, which wasn't loving for you. I think because you felt for you, the most important part of any church DNA, as in how you love people and how you relate to them, because that was kind of missing for you. The relationships were more about discipleship and, you know,
leadership, development,
all that stuff. You were much more, listen, there's a flood out there, let's just go help the poor. No, maybe not. So it wasn't, do you know what I mean? So I think you might have felt more positively about the rest of the DNA had that been there, but because that wasn't, you kind of didn't really want to know, did you?
It was a
You
crucial
backed
part to be
off.
missing to me.
Yeah,
It was
yeah,
a
I know, I don't
crucial
disagree.
part to be missing for me from the
Yeah.
leadership, because again, I can't. It's the one. It's, to me, this is the one church, unfortunately, that caused my falling away from the faith. I parked it. I put it on the shelf. And again, you can listen in my previous podcast, faith there and back kind of thing. I forget what the title of it was, but I explain there the fact that, yeah, I actually deconstructed.
From faith to doubt and back again.
Yeah, from faith to doubt and back again. Yeah. This, to me, this church and the way that this church was run, the institutionalization of it made me want to walk away from church. I think I can't put it any other way. I did not want to continue being a part of that, because I really felt that what we had here was a business, not a church. And because I was actually in on the meetings, I was a minute taker, I saw how things were actually decided and everything like that. My goodness, I struggled. I so struggled to be in those meetings. I wanted to just yell and scream sometimes as to what I saw, because there wasn't what I considered God's kingdom in there, And I know that that's a really harsh, potentially judgmental statement, to be there. But in my heart of hearts, I was hurting. I was hoping to see something different, and it wasn't. It really, really wasn't. It was almost like a leadership that was separate from life and the way that the vast number of the congregation were actually living. It was a different world that was it was bordering on celebrity status, basically. And yeah, I fell away. I fell away from faith. That's the church that basically sealed it for me. That experience, I just felt, nah, I parked my faith for quite a while. I've come back to it now. And again, it's one of those things where we can look back and thinking, this is what I would take forward from it. This is what I would leave behind. A lot for that I would leave behind, unfortunately.
Can you just comment at going back to the I don't know if you can say this briefly or not, but when I said some people have hurtful experiences and they don't fall away from their faith.
Yeah.
Other people have hurtful experiences and it makes them question, fall away, park, or completely abandon their faith.
Yeah.
Why do you think, what was it that made it hard for you to hold on to your faith in Jesus in that? Even if you were walking away from the church experience?
I think my faith in Jesus never left, right? Like I said, I parked it and shelved it. Yeah. I didn't want to attend Sunday services anymore. I didn't want to go ahead and be part of institutionalized church, midweek meetings, the whole thing. I think the thing that really affected me the most, and it's the bad and the ugly side of every church that we've been part of, is the leadership that leads it in a way that doesn't honor, for me, godly leadership. Yeah. And that to me was so staggering, that the people that we actually say should be the ones showing the way, demonstrating God, being God's representative here on earth in all the character, the love, the grace, the mercy, obviously the truth, yes, bringing all of that, but having, I just didn't see it.
Can I ask you a difficult question?
Go on then.
What would you say to someone who would ask, were your expectations too high, in that leaders are also people who fail and people who mess up?
Yes, my expectations probably were high there. Yes, I do acknowledge that leaders, are not perfect. What I didn't appreciate, though, is that there didn't seem to be the accountability for the leaders, for them also to be humble, to learn, to be on what I saw more than anything was the concern for the brand, which was mixed in with God's kingdom. You know,
I think that's a good point, actually.
yes,
Because if I think about the individuals that we're talking about, my perspective is that they all had good hearts. There was actually a lot of humility in all of them. You know, as individuals, they were, I would say that there was a lot of godliness about them.
Yes,
I think the problem is that we're looking at with institutional church here, and we will be unpacking this more in the coming weeks as well, is when you get the machine of all of that together, and when you get a brand to protect, and when you have other factors in their hierarchies, authority structures, for me, also throw in, it was a very strongly prophetic church. And by that, I mean, there were certain characters, certain leaders in there who were quite quick to say, God has said this, and we're doing this because God has said this. And that also sometimes created a very difficult culture, because when then that thing didn't happen, I didn't always see enough what I would call integrity. I'm not saying that they're not people of integrity, but to say, oh, well, instead of me trying to shoehorn in now how that prophetic word actually was fulfilled, just to say, maybe we got that wrong.
Or the other thing that wasn't there is if the leader basically said, God has said this, there isn't a road to be able to go ahead and challenge that if you don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Even the wording, you know, God has told me, right, versus I believe God has told me. Guys, what do you think? There's such a different approach.
Said, but when it's not, that's the issue. And I think, because again, we're running out of time, but I think that's also just a key thing in terms of how spiritual abuse can happen. And in charismatic churches, that how the prophetic can really be used as a manipulative tool.
Yeah.
And without humility, just being far more careful about the wording you use in the first place. Secondly, if you do feel something very strongly, and not just for yourself, but you make it public, and then it doesn't happen, just have the humility to admit mistakes, admit that you got it wrong. And I don't think that we saw enough of that.
No.
And there were one or two things for me, because I don't want to have to come back to this in another podcast, but one thing in particular for me was, again, seeing how things were really spoken about behind the scenes, because I was very close to one or two people.
Same here.
And then seeing how they were presented from the front, and almost like someone would actually make a decision, and then a particular process, a very serious and important process, happened under kind of a veneer of consultation and wanting to hear what the body thought about it and all the rest of it. But really, you know, the guy at the top had already made the decision before all of that, and it was just a fake process in my view. And it would have been so much better just to have been honest about what was really thought with all the people involved. Do it with honesty. Don't shroud it in anything else. Just, if you're not convinced that, you know, these people are right, or you want to bring these people in, just be honest. Just do it freely with integrity. And
what you feel,
that was the thing that I struggled with, and which was the one thing that made me think in the end, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
There was so much that, you know, good that I took from that.
Yeah.
That was the one thing that then came against my sense of, no, that is a step too far. And when I tried to say, this isn't right, guys, why not this? Well, because it's all the guys higher up the chain that are making the decisions. Don't look to me. So yeah.
I think again, when you say, you know, you're mixing the brand with the kingdom of God, but also the brand was also being mixed, I think, with the way that things run in the world is one of the things that I found, you know, or perceived. You know, you got a political parties, you know, everybody's got to toe the party line. You know, things are presented to the media and everything in a way that what's going on in the background is totally different. And it's like you were saying, you know, that you know, we will present it this way, but what really happened was this way, and you can't really do much about it. You know,
it wasn't transparency.
No, it was a very politicized approach to decision making. Like I said, I think the brand became the business, you know, of the church, the protection of the brand, the uh, the marketing of the brand, the making the brand bigger, as it were. Um, yeah, I mean, there's consequences, there has been some serious consequences because of that, with the church as it currently stands. Um, but again, I think this to me was the biggest example of an institutionalized church, how difficult it is to be able to go ahead and speak up, bring in, you know, and offer what you actually happen to have, even if it's a little bit different. Um,
And to bring to have
yeah,
what you feel heard without it being made about you or your problem or gaslighted or whatever. I wasn't personally gaslighted, but
yeah,
it was still very difficult
yeah.
to bring challenge because of the layers of hierarchy and authority that were going on there.
Yeah, so like I said, I mean, this is, I think on balance, what you're actually hearing here in the podcast is probably a lot more ugly and bad, than good. There was a lot of good, here, but for me, I think a lot of the bad and the ugly experiences that I had really overshadowed, a lot of what was actually going on, because I think I was at the center viewing, the politicized approach to the business of running the brand of this particular church, you know, and how hurtful that was for me to see that is what the kingdom of God was being expressed as, and it wasn't, and it really, really wasn't. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, we've actually said quite a lot, and I think some of it may actually come up as quite negative on the bad and the ugly side. But um, what would you say is your takeaway on a positive note from this church?
Yeah, I mean, lots of positives. I think for a good 2 or 3 years there, it was one of the happiest times of my life, just like the other one.
Yeah.
I think the mid-sized community model of, or it could be even smaller than that, doing life together with people, and being real with people. The emphasis being on that being where the life is,
Yeah.
and the Sunday service, if you do have one, is like the icing on the cake, not the main thing. That's definitely a big takeaway for me, and that was all really positive. I think kind of a positive but kind of caution also from it. The learning from it that I would take away is just being really careful not to put leaders on a pedestal, because when you put them on a pedestal and when you give them that much power that you think that they're so much more experienced, or doing the thing and know more than you and all the rest of it, that also then opens the door for the potential for greater damage to you, or even abuse.
Yeah.
When they might speak stuff into your life that isn't actually right and isn't from God. It's their perspective, it's their opinion, and because you've given them that place in your life, that would be my caution, to not do that.
Yeah.
Because there's only one person that should have that level of authority to speak into our life, and that's God Himself. So that's the caution for me, and I think that's definitely a protection, not to be cynical, but just to be wise, really.
Yeah.
With who you open up your heart to, and how you see leaders versus Jesus Himself.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Very much so. Yeah. Our church experience, as you can probably tell, has been an incredible journey. Much that we have actually taken with us, to make part of our toolbox, so to speak. But also much, that we would actually discard, along the way. The church, we want to see it in all its glory, as Jesus and the Apostle Paul basically say. It's a beautiful bride, but we need to make sure that the dress that it's actually wearing and everything associated with it, sparkles, absolutely sparkles. And anything that doesn't, it's not part of the wedding. It's not part of the ceremony, so to speak. So, yeah, I mean, thanks for listening. I know it's not always easy, when you're sharing your experiences of the good, the bad, and the ugly, but we will continue having other podcasts that actually continue addressing reimagining church. What is it that we're taking forward? What can church actually really seriously be like?
Yeah.
you know, when we actually apply everything that we've actually learned. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, please continue looking out for these. We will be having other speakers as well, you know, as well as sharing some of our own experiences again as well. But listen, join us on Facebook, our home community. If you want to join in, if you want to add anything, if you want to go ahead and make comments, you know, about, you know, some of your thoughts and opinions as well. But until then, yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for listening.
Bless you.
God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.